The Zimbabwean government offering to help its citizens to return home. It all revolves around this ZEP, the Zimbabwe Exemption Permit. The system comes to an end in June. Now, it affects almost 200,000 people, so it does have a very serious knock-on effect as well. Zimbabwe says it doesn't want its citizens left stranded in South Africa, but as we're about to hear, some are unwilling to go home. They're seeking an urgent court order against the Home Affairs Ministry. Well, their lawyer representing them in that case is Mr. Simba Chitando, joining us today. And Simba, good to have you coming in to join me as well. And let's just talk about this news about the assistance, it seems, from the Zimbabwean government to help their citizens. What did you make of all of this?
Thank you for having me. Greetings to your viewers. The decision by the Zimbabwean government, announced by the ambassador of Zimbabwe to South Africa, is, in my view, consistent with what any ambassador throughout the world would do for their nationals in their respective countries. Every ambassador has an obligation to secure and procure the safe return of their nationals whenever they find themselves in jeopardy or in a position where they may be stranded or in difficulty. So what the Zimbabwean ambassador has done is consistent with his obligations, and if he had not done that, then the question would be why he didn't do so, considering the amount of pressure that is being put on Zimbabwean nationals in South Africa, specifically the ZEP holders in this case, who have a deadline that is looming. And obviously the Zimbabwean government looks at this deadline, looks at the circumstances, the number of people involved, and they've decided to embark on the program that they have embarked upon. This doesn't diminish also the rights of Zimbabweans in South Africa to approach the courts, to challenge the decision, which they have done. Just a correction, at this stage we're not at an urgent application level. That there was an urgent application that was successfully on the 31st of January, it was a successful application to get the Zimbabwean children into schools, the ones that were denied access to schooling.
Into schools in South Africa?
Yes, into schools. They were already going to school, and in some cases they were denied access to school because they didn't have study permits for various reasons. More specifically, their parents' status in the country is questionable, considering the end of the ZEP. So we were dealing with that, and it was successfully granted in the Pretoria High Court. On the 11th of April to the 14th of April, the ordinary roll proceedings, the matter that started, at least for ZEPA, in October 2021, that will be heard alongside various other legal challenges by the Helen Suzman Foundation, by Zimbabwean Immigration Federation, by COMSA, which is an amicus, and I believe Operation Dudula and ATDF have also decided to join in the legal fray in that matter.
Yes, is this a good thing, what the Zimbabwean government is doing? You're saying it's what an ambassador should do, so do you agree with the move?
Well, we would have to. I mean, if there were, as a way of an example, if there were South Africans, a large number of South Africans, even, or a small number of South Africans that were stranded in the UK or the US or even in Zimbabwe itself, the South African ambassador in those countries would be expected to make provision for the safe return, safe return of their nationals.
What does this now mean for the court case that you're talking about come April? How does this change the question around the exemption permits, but now that the government has said, come back?
Well, the case is not affected by what the government has done. In fact, if you listen to what the ambassador said, Dr. Ambassadorial was very clear. He said that he is prepared to make provision for the Zimbabweans who want to come back home, given the circumstances in South Africa. He's very clear on that. And it also has to be said that with or without the ZEP termination, the Zimbabwean embassy and the Zimbabwean consulate would always make provision for the safe return of its nationals, whether they are ZEP holders or not. So that doesn't diminish, as I said, the legal rights of the Zimbabwean nationals who want to challenge whatever legal difficulties or issues that they have in South Africa. It doesn't change it at all. So the proceedings in April will go ahead with unaffected by the decision by the ambassador to make or to facilitate the return of Zimbabwean nationals to Zim.
Let's circle back to the court case itself then as well, and I think if we can just take a second, remind viewers what is at stake here. We're reporting close to 200,000 people rely on these exemption permits as well, and as I think you used the word deadline, and they're racing against the clock right now. What happens if this clock runs out? What are you aiming to achieve?
Well, we're in the hands of the court. The matter, as I said, will be heard between the 11th to the 14th of April. We are hopeful, and we'll ask the court. It will be a full bench. Again, we're in the hands of the court to make an order or a judgment. Preferably in a situation like this, we may seek an order and then the judgment later to set the rights of the ZEP holders in this matter. So, and we'll hope that will happen before the deadline, before the 30 June 2023 deadline. April does give time, the mid-April to 30 June. I'm sure that the courts would be able to dispense with the matter within that time.
I also would imagine, though, the greater concern is, yes, while you've got adults that you're dealing with as far as ZEP is concerned, there were Zimbabwean children, children of Zimbabwean parents born in South Africa, and now you're going to have this issue as well. What's the story there?
Yes, it's the decision by the South African government to abruptly end the ZEP has been challenged for various grounds, and one of them you've just mentioned. ZEP holders have rights in of themselves, so they've got the rights per their permit, as they outline in their permit. But those rights they extend to their dependents, and their dependents have got a whole host of other rights provided for in the Children's Act in the case of their children that are born here. And in many cases, ZEP holders are married to South African nationals, and in fact also ZEP holders are married to nationals of other countries. So the decision to end the ZEP and to force the parents of these children into a situation where they may be forced to abandon their kids in school systems and break families. It's regrettable.
Or even have to pull kids out of schools to go back.
Kids out of school. So yes, which is the situation now. We were successful on the 31st of January. The order provides the children an opportunity to write the matric exams and to continue on in their education till the end of this year. But their parents have a mid-year deadline, and the children are supposed to study under the pressure of not knowing what's going to happen to their parents come June. It's a very, very ugly situation, and we really are hopeful that the courts can make sense of this, and sanity may prevail, and I hope that the ZEP holders would be in safe hands.
And you're the one taking that fight forward for them, as you have been for a long time. And Simba, thank you for your time coming in to speak to us this morning. It is a complicated court case. It's a complicated story, but when it comes down to the children, their education and their parents, I think that's what we've got to take away from this. And thank you for coming in. Simba Chitando joining us this morning. The lawyer representing, I would say, the vast majority, if not all, of the Zimbabwe Exemption Permit residents that are over here in South Africa. We now know the Zimbabwean government offering to help them come back home, but it's not as easy as that, as you just heard. My thanks again to Simba for joining.